The front door came off its hinges at precisely 3:11 in the morning. I knew the exact time because my digital nightstand clock glowed a sharp, bleeding red in the pitch blackness of my bedroom, and those numbers were the first thing my eyes locked onto when the wood splintered. Before my mind could fully process the sound, flashlight beams were cutting through the dark like searchlights, and heavy hands slammed me out of bed onto the freezing hardwood. Police shouting, orders to get down, and tactical gear moving around me shattered the quiet house I had owned on Ridgeview Drive for 5 years. Even with a knee jammed into my spine and cold steel clicking around my wrists, my voice remained flat and controlled as I told them I was not resisting. 22 years as a criminal investigator for the military teaches you how to compartmentalize panic when everything around you goes sideways. Pressed against the floor, I could smell the fresh lemon wax my wife used every weekend, an absurd thing to notice while being detained in your own underwear. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream cut through the chaos from the end of the hallway, a sound that instantly turned my blood to ice. It was my 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, terrified after being ripped from her sleep by armed men breaching our home. I yelled out to the officers that there was a young child in the building and that they needed to keep their weapons pointed away from her room. A deputy stepped into my doorway, confirming the child was secured by a female officer and that an older teenage male was contained in the adjacent bedroom. That was my stepson, Tyler, a high school senior who had lost his biological father years ago and had spent a decade learning to trust me. Now, he was watching masked men haul his stepfather out of bed, a sight that could easily destroy every ounce of security we had built. As they marched me down the corridor, I caught a glimpse of Chloe clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with terror as I calmly told her it was all a mistake and that I loved her. Passing through the kitchen, I saw Tyler standing in his sweatpants, his face a dangerous mix of teenage confusion and pure rage. I looked him dead in the eye and told him to stay with his sister and call Judge Vance, whose emergency number was written on the refrigerator magnet. Tyler gave me a tight nod, showing the steady resilience I had spent years teaching him through actions rather than empty words. We stepped out onto the front porch, the freezing autumn air hitting my bare skin as my feet touched the cold concrete. My entire neighborhood was illuminated by a circus of flashing red and blue lights, drawing residents out onto their lawns in bathrobes to witness my public disgrace. Our next-door neighbor, Arthur Vance, stood on his lawn holding a steaming mug of coffee, watching the spectacle with quiet disbelief. He did not say a word, but he gave me a slow, respectful nod that told me he knew exactly who I was, regardless of the restraints on my wrists. Then, my eyes traveled to the edge of the driveway, where my wife, Cynthia, stood near the mailbox wearing an expensive silk robe. She was completely calm, holding her smartphone steady with both hands as she recorded a video of the entire arrest. There were no tears, no panic, and no frantic questions for the deputies. She simply stood there capturing the scene with the posture of a director executing a well-rehearsed plan. In that brief second, our eyes locked, and my 2 decades of investigating frauds, cheats, and professional liars instantly kicked in. I saw absolutely zero surprise in Cynthia's eyes, realizing she knew the authorities would be breaching our home long before the first battering ram hit the wood. I did not yell at her or beg for an explanation. Instead, I mentally filed away her dry eyes, her steady hands, and her perfect camera angle for the defense strategy I was already building. They pushed me into the back of the cruiser, and through the tinted glass, I watched Cynthia lower her phone and walk back inside without a single backward glance. It had taken exactly 13 minutes to completely dismantle my reputation, but whoever engineered this had made a fatal miscalculation. The drive to the county sheriff's station took under 15 minutes, which I spent in total silence mapping out the legal battlefield in my head. A pre-dawn raid meant a judge had signed a high-stakes warrant based on substantial fabricated evidence, meaning this was a coordinated hit rather than a routine misunderstanding. The station was dead quiet and blindingly bright under the fluorescent lights when they led me into a standard interrogation room with beige walls and a recording camera. A young deputy placed a paper cup of water on the metal table, avoiding eye contact entirely as if my alleged crimes were contagious. When I demanded to know the specific charges, he glanced at his paperwork and read off fraud, money laundering, and grand larceny before locking me inside. At 4:12 in the morning, the heavy door swung open, and an experienced detective named Marcus Brody walked in holding a thick manila folder. He had the weathered face of a man who had seen the worst of humanity but still kept a shred of his integrity intact. I watched his expression closely as he sat down and opened the file, noting the exact moment his eyebrows shot up in surprise before he went completely still. He reread the first page twice, looked up at me with an entirely new expression, and immediately ordered the guard at the door to remove my handcuffs. The deputy hesitated in shock, but Brody barked the order again, realizing the department had just made a catastrophic error. Brody leaned over the table, stating my full name along with my extensive background as a highly decorated chief warrant officer for the Army Criminal Investigation Division. He noted my top secret clearances and my history of taking down high-level military embezzlement rings before asking a single, direct question. He wanted to know if someone had intentionally set me up, causing the deputy by the door to take a physical step back in realization. I looked Brody in the eye, confirming his suspicion, and explained that the anonymous physical mail packet used to secure the warrant was designed specifically to bypass a digital footprint. The claims of me being a flight risk were manufactured to guarantee a loud, traumatic public arrest that my wife could film for custody leverage. Brody irregularly pushed the confidential file across the table, allowing me to dissect the 26 pages of forged financial statements in less than 10 minutes. I pointed out that the headers used a standard generic font instead of the bank's proprietary corporate typeface, a lazy mistake a normal auditor would miss. Furthermore, the alleged wire transfers were dated on a Saturday when federal banking systems are completely closed, showing the fabricator failed to check a simple calendar. The final giveaway was my corporate tax identification number, which was off by a single digit at the very end, proving the saboteur had close access to my files but lacked an investigator's eye. I looked across the table and told Detective Brody that the person responsible for this clumsy frame job was my own wife, Cynthia. I advised him to pull the security footage from local big box stores to find her purchasing the untraceable burner phone used for the anonymous tip. I also told him to run a forensic audit on the commercial printers at her real estate firm, as she lacked a printing device at our house. Brody stopped writing, staring at me with the profound respect of a lawman who realized his suspect was far better at his job than anyone else in the room. I explained that I was not a criminal, but a highly targeted husband whose wife needed to neutralize him before he uncovered her own illegal financial schemes.